So I want to say that this is continuing to talk about coping mechanisms, but it's really not the same thing that I was talking about before. I don't feel so anyway. But yeah, this whole notion that I want to explore is just this idea of just wanting to lose control, to just completely go off the rails, be reckless, be irresponsible, not have any obligation even to oneself, and how that kind of ties into coping mechanisms in a way, or at least certain states where you would need coping mechanisms, so states of distress and anxiety and whatever. Not fun, comfortable places to be. So yeah, I guess just get right into it. It's a thought that I've had many times, but I don't think I've ever done. I really can't think of a time that I completely just went off the rails and was so reckless with my own life that it impeded my future, I guess, or had the possibility to. There were, I don't know, there's been times where I don't know, like maybe for like small decisions, I guess, that I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do this or do that, and I can't even, like, again, nothing that was big enough that would have like affected my future really, and I think that's what really separates, you know, instances where like I just don't care anymore, and then you do something that is smaller versus like going on a huge massive bender, not going into work, not doing this, not doing that, completely just whatever. It might be out of depression or anger or like, I guess both of those things come down to pain in some way. But it's this thing of, I don't know, it's a romanticized thing. Or at least for me it is, and for other people I'm sure it is too. And it's probably romanticized by people who don't do it because it would be nice to do sometimes. Like, in reality, the reason I haven't, you know, completely just gone off the rails and you know, whether it was through substance abuse or just, I don't even know what, that seems to be just like the popular thing to do, is be like, hey, I'm just gonna, you know, get super high on all this stuff, or just get like super drunk for days and days and days or whatever, and not care about anything else, and just force myself into a state where, like, while I am conscious and sober, I'm deciding to put myself in a state where I will probably continually want to be in that state, if that makes sense. Now I lost the original point that I was going with for that. But yeah, it's not something that, I mean, I've ever just done. I don't think I've ever been that broken. I mean, everyone has different limits, right? Everyone has different things, different lines and thresholds. And I have never gotten to a place where I guess that's the thing. It's like, I guess you have to lose control in order to want to lose control. Well, no, that sentence doesn't make sense. But I mean, you have to lose control in order to lose control. I have not lost control to the point where I actually executed, you know, a self-destructive cycle that surrendered my control to the ability I was not able to perform my daily tasks, you know, in such a way where I could not move forward with my life, you know, whether it was school or work or certain relationships or something like that. But like, that's the thing, I've been in places, anxious enough places, where I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I wish that I could just do this or do that or be irresponsible, and I just don't want the responsibility right now. I don't want to make these choices. I don't want to have to go through this hard work right now. I don't want to have to go through the aftermath of these choices or whatever, right? Like, there's so many different scenarios where I feel like I've been, like, you know, in a place where I've had to do too much thinking and too much acting, and there was just too much responsibility on me. I think that's probably where it happens the most. I feel there's too much responsibility on me, and it's usually responsibility for myself by myself, like things that I'm responsible for. Not that anyone else is necessarily relying on me, but it's just like me. I have to do this in order to maintain whatever, in order to just like pay rent, or in order to I don't know what else. I just think of monetary things right now, but I mean like stuff about the future, like going to school, like when I was in university and things like that, and then I'm dealing with other like emotional, personal problems, and then feeling like this stress and anxiety of having to make certain choices and being like, I just don't want to. I just don't want to. And again, this idea of losing control and being lost for a while is so. I don't want to overuse the word romanticized, but it's so appealing to someone like me and I think others that maybe have never done it, or probably appealing to those who have done it too, because I mean then it's like having a scapegoat. I personally feel like I would still be responsible for everything I was doing or not doing while I was in that state because I chose to be in that state. But I mean, it's just being like, hey, I put myself in a space where I can't even care anymore. I can't have the burden and the weight of all these responsibilities, the responsibility to self of even dealing with my own emotions and stuff. I can't do it because I'm not in a state to do it, and I put myself in that state. And yeah, so there's things that, like drug culture, sometimes I romanticize in my head because of certain things, and that's one of them, of just like being in states where you can't be responsible. I don't know, like I said, I've never been close to doing anything like that, whether it's illegal drugs or with alcohol or other ways. I'm sure that people can put themselves in that place, and I don't want to say it sucks. Like, obviously, there's a reason I didn't do it because I feel like, oh, I don't want to screw up my life in the future or my immediate future or whatever. Like, I am in control enough to realize I need to stay in control. And that despite it being very difficult and I want to just give up, control and responsibility in order to feel freedom, because I think that's the thing. Being weighted by responsibility, obligation, and all these other things takes away so much freedom sometimes that it's suffocating. But it's still not enough to make me, because I know that that's one kind of freedom, and then the other, instance that if I were to put myself, and let's not even say that it's an addictive substance, and let's just say that's not a thing, but I'm like, I'm not a slave necessarily to the addiction, physical dependency, but I would end up being not free to act as how I want to act because I can't think clearly, or I can't feel clearly. I don't even understand myself, my own feelings and emotions, and I'm not, and if I did understand them or I thought I did, I wouldn't be able to just process them in the right way, to act in the right way that would benefit me long term. And like I said, this relates to coping mechanisms because obviously I need a certain amount of coping mechanisms to get through so I don't ever get to this point. And like I said, for me, I just never have gotten to that point. I see it as a very appealing place to be. And I guess I should clarify too, it's not just going off the rails on a 3-week bender or even a weekend, like where you're just messed up out of your mind. For some people, I think this is a way of life that is managed, like, if drugs become your coping mechanism, whatever drug that is, like if that becomes your coping mechanism and it alters you so that you don't have to deal with everything else. I mean, that's the kind of drug use I'm talking about here, whether it be alcohol or whatever. You can maintain the rest of your life at a certain level, because I mean, some people, this is like a weekly thing or like, every couple of days thing. It's not going so far off track that you can't come back when you want to, put it that way. So I mean, there's different levels to this, and there is some, I mean, I don't romanticize that life at all because I feel like I'm already conscious enough, I'm already aware and sober enough to realize that, like, I want to be in control of my life the majority of the time. That would be nice, and that I know that choices I make now will affect my future, and I want to be able to set myself up to be in the best position possible for my future, obviously. So I feel like that kind of way that I think a lot of people end up living their life, being dependent on drugs as a coping mechanism. Again, talking about an unhealthy coping mechanism, I don't want, like to I don't know. There's just a certain, and this line is different for everyone, obviously, and there's just a certain level, I think, when you are, I don't know how to explain it. I'm like interrupting myself in the middle of this, but let's say meditation is something that I would need to do every couple of days, just recenter, or like I'm really, really stressed and I'm like, I just need to go meditate right now and clear my head. Let's just say, and I don't know this because I'm not a cannabis user. I have tried the substance a very few times. I can count on one hand in my whole life, and it's just not something I do. So, but let's just say instead of meditating, that was the activity, that was your coping mechanism that you were able to do, and you were able to clear your mind and able to access your feelings better than you were when you were in an anxious state. I don't have a problem with that. Like I said, I'm talking about, it's not just the legality of whatever the drug is. I'm just talking about drug culture or drug habits that have a negative impact on you because they push you away from feeling what you're supposed to be feeling. And the thing is that I think that it's necessary sometimes, at least for me, to step away from my feelings sometimes, or step away maybe from feeling my feelings in the way that I'm feeling them. I feel like this is getting cryptic and convoluted and stuff, but you need a break sometimes for your own feelings. I mean, obviously, to me, there's a certain limit that comes with that because I don't want to reach a point where I'm so irresponsible, blah, 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 blah. Like sometimes people sleep and sleep and sleep, and that becomes unhealthy at a certain point too, right? But I mean, like, anything excessive is probably going to be negative at some point because you're taking time and energy away from other things that you could and should be doing. I wish I could remember the point I was on before I interrupted myself, but yeah, that's just what it comes down to. Is that it's like I said, there's some people who can manage, and like I said, like it's this middle ground that I don't think I'll ever be in, and I never romanticize of people that use whatever drugs and other things. It's not just drugs. I mean, it's plenty of other things, and I have used other things as negative coping mechanisms a bunch that were not substance related at all. And so it's just using any negative coping mechanism just enough where you can be irresponsible, be self-destructive for a time. Self-destructive even in the way of just like creating more pain for yourself by not dealing with what you should be dealing with. And then you're in a state of like, okay, I just got through that day. And then a couple of, like, and again, it doesn't put you in such a bad spot that you can't function, you can't go to your job, you can't take care of your child, you can't do this or that or the other thing. There's a very measured way I think some people live their lives, and to me that's just really not appealing at all. I don't know if it's just stupid, like some weird sense of pride and virtue that I have that I'm like, I don't have to rely on those things. I mean, there's some people who are medicated, like prescription medications that keep them at a certain balance and stuff, and I don't know, there's just, to me, it's just I still have a very negative stigma of using certain coping mechanisms to get through. I think there's things that obviously take away from you while they're trying to help. And again, I have engaged in a lot of negative coping mechanisms. And then there's things that add to your life. There's coping mechanisms that help you deal with the stuff that's going on. And it doesn't make more problems for you. It makes less. It just helps. It helps while it helps, while the other one destroys while it helps. So, anyway. Again, that's not what I'm, like, that middle ground is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about completely going, like, this feeling, this desire only comes to me when I'm in really bad states of anxiety. Because when it's in like the fight or flight mode, usually I'm fight. I guess that's usually where I am. I don't really do much to run necessarily in typical ways that people do, but I mean I do run from my feelings sometimes, definitely, and I've used negative coping mechanisms in order to distract me from what I'm feeling, and that's no good. But yeah, I just end up having this thought of like, what if I just like, I wish I could just throw all my responsibility away. I wish I just want to go and do X, Y, or Z, and not have to live like this, not have to live with this weight on my shoulders, and just like have to think about this and think about that and have all these responsibilities. Like, it doesn't happen very often. I don't get to that place very often, but every once in a while that appeal is there, and I understand the appeal. Like I said, I have never gotten to a place where I've done that, and this leads into a different conversation in a way, but I guess I'll talk about it now too, with this whole, well, yeah, maybe, yeah. Well, I won't go in depth in it because I think it's something I talk about at more length another time. But this notion that I wish I could remember who said it, but there was a quote that said, um, oh, now I don't remember. I won't be able to say it verbatim anymore. I guess I thought I had it in the bag, but falling apart is a privilege was maybe that was verbatim, and they were implying that they don't have that privilege, and there's a whole bunch of reasons they were saying that, but I identified with that line a lot, and I felt like that, you know, falling apart is a privilege, and that's something that I don't have the privilege of, and I don't feel like I've ever had that because I haven't had a big enough safety net in order to help me back up, and not to say anything that like that emotion. I guess a lot of my stuff goes to finances because that's a constant stress for me. So I mean, like if I were to lose a job or not finish school and have loans and this and that, like I don't have that type of safety net. I guess I have an emotional safety net. Like I have people that care about me that I can rely on that would help me. But I mean, when I talk about going off the rails, I mean I talk about being so self-destructive that you might be immediately sacrificing your very, very, very near future when it comes to your, you know, life, whatever you build your life around, whether it's family or occupation or whatever, that you are so explosive or, I mean, self-destructive in any way that would push away your supports, and also your livelihood. So, yeah, I just, that goes hand in hand with the whole thing of, like, I feel like I've never had the privilege of falling apart, and that is something that weighs on me a little bit of being like, man, these people are so fortunate that have family with money or like more support systems or whatever. And it's like, man, it must feel good to know that you can fall apart and still be okay. Now at the end, again, like I have this thing that's this pride of being like, yeah, but I don't do that. I don't have that, and even if I did, I wouldn't do it, which I don't know if I would or not. I like the fact in some ways that I don't, like, I don't, it's like, I don't know, there's some people where they come from money and they don't take advantage of that. They really want to work hard and do things for themselves, and they learn a certain work ethic, and sometimes it's a sibling in the same exact family who's the opposite and really takes advantage of that money that's available to them and doesn't work hard, etc. So, I mean, it's not just how you were raised, it's not just conditioning, it's not just nurture. I really think that whatever, there's nurture and nature that both play in there. It's not just the fact that you could be in exact same circumstances for the most part and still feel the opposite. That might be confusing, but I'll get back to the fact that if I did have that safety net, I would hope that I wouldn't just rely on it and use it without absolutely needing to. And I don't think you ever need necessarily to completely fall apart. That's a stupid thing to say. Halfway through the sentence, I realized that was dumb. Obviously, like, I don't know everyone's circumstances. There's people that feel like they can't exist on this planet anymore, and they feel like they can't do it, right? I don't know. I've never found that selfish, I guess, the way that some people do. I can't say I completely understand that space, but I understand it enough to not have that thing of like, that's really selfish. People who do that are selfish and horrible. I don't have that feeling. But I mean, when it comes to like completely losing control to the point where whatever, like, again, there's so many people that lose control that are in privileged positions, and I don't know. There's just something, like I said, there's something about this sense of pride of not having to do that, not letting yourself do that. And it's not because I have other support systems there. It's that whole stupid, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which in a lot of the context it's set in, I think is ridiculous and I don't agree with. But I mean, there is something that I pride myself in being of a certain strength or having a certain will to continue and march on and whatever. And that's not necessarily a good thing or a right thing. I think I am, you know what, I am privileged. I am privileged that I feel that my chemical balances in my brain don't attack me in ways that other people do. I feel like my mental stability and my mental health is at a place where I can deal with things. better than other people can. That is a privilege that I have. That's a privilege that maybe I take for granted sometimes, and I shouldn't. Um, but like I said, I feel like I went into way more depth, but I mean it was good because I learned some things about myself, and as to why I had feelings that now I don't even think I have anymore about certain things, and why it's not good to have those feelings necessarily and be really. I shouldn't say that I'm proud or take pride in my strength and my will, because there's only so much of that is my choice. I feel like when it comes to things like mental health, I mean, there's only so much that's in my control. I choose, like that's the one thing I am choosing, to not go off the rails and do whatever, because there's so many. I would be so much worse coming back because I don't have that safety net. Some people don't necessarily have as much choice or as much will or strength. It's not available to them to make those choices. So I guess the thing is, if that choice is made available to you, then I don't know. I'm happy, I guess, that I'm privileged enough to not be in that state. I don't know. There's two things going on. There's people that maybe don't have as much control, just chemically in their brain. They don't have as much control, and then there's people who have they're perfectly sound mentally, and they make a choice to go off the rails because it feels good. And those are the people that I'm sometimes envious of and also loathe at the same time, because I feel like it's a weakness and I would rather struggle through life with my head up than whatever. But anyway, I think that kind of wraps things up. It's, just exploring that idea. Like I said, I've never gotten to that place yet. I doubt I ever will. But there are times where I'm envious of people who just let it all go. And I don't mean like they walk away from everything and they go live in the woods and they're the happiest person alive. I mean, like they get into a drug-fueled, weekend or weeks or months and exist in that place where they don't feel responsible. I mean, like no matter what, when they come back to life, I feel like it's going to be harder. But there's just this little thing in me that's like, oh, that would just be so freeing to be able to do that, which isn't good, but. It's always a small thing. It's just a thing, and when I'm really anxious, it pops up. So anyway, we'll see you on another time.